so excited to be with you again this evening. We just entered 2021, and the things that have been going on since then. On January the 5th, we voted in Georgia, and it was a victory, as well as January the 6th on that Wednesday. It was a disaster. So I guess today we're going to have a conversation about these things that are happening right now as we speak. Our guest is Reverend Carroll Sr., and he is an associate minister of Christian Fellowship Baptist Church in Capitol Hill, Maryland. He holds a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Strayer University. Currently, he is pursuing his master divinity degree at Wesley Theological Seminary here in Washington, D.C. He is an author of 2 books, and his most recent is Saved, Sanctified, and Addicted to Pornography, Overcoming Sexual Perversion. He is also the host of a new podcast called Turn Up the Volume. You can see his podcast on his Facebook Live and his YouTube page. He's a husband, father, preacher, and teacher, and a young black millennial who is on fire for the Lord and doing a lot of social justice things here in Washington and throughout this country. Reverend Carroll, it's a pleasure to have you here today, and we thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Hi. Happy Sunday. Hello, everybody in Radio Land.
Yes. And like I said during the introduction, is that America's change of demographics, which indicate in 2040, whites will no longer be a numerical majority, be the reason for this whole rage, this white rage that happened January the 6th. What is your feeling about that?
Oh, I definitely agree. That is why we saw what we saw January the 6th at the United States Capitol here in D.C. You have a great handful of white supremacists, white extremists, who are literally in fear that their existence will be no more, or their whiteness as they know it will be the minority, because in the inception of this country, the majority was whiteness. And whiteness has privilege. Whiteness has its place in this society. And the older that this country gets, the more and more we see diversity. We see diversity in terms of color. We see diversity in terms of beliefs. And it's no longer just diversity in the small places that relates to our churches and the workplace, but it's in government now, and that's something that they definitely fear.
So looking at the Georgians elected 2 Democratic senators, and this dramatically kind of tilted the balance of power in the Senate. And for your views, how has their election affected sedition acts that took place January 6th at the Capitol?
Well, it's affected in so many ways because, of course, as you know, Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff, they won the election in Georgia. And so what that means is the majority in the Senate is now majority Democrat, as we already had in the House, a majority Democrat. And now you have a Democratic president. And so the minority now is the Republican Party, of course, where if we look at that, the Democratic Party, they're more so liberal, known to be liberal, known to be more so inclined to make decisions as it relates to as what I would call the least of these people who have needs, whether it be social needs, whether it needs to be health care or what have you. They're going to make decisions that would benefit not necessarily those in power or the 1% that are financially well off, but those who actually need from a day-to-day basis, the everyday man, the common man, the man that works hard, the man or woman that works hard for that. And so it's not just affected on a national level, but it's also affected on a global level, because if you've been looking at the news, there are a lot of other countries, a lot of other leaders who have been looking at what's going on in the United States of America, and they have been quite outspoken as it relates to whether they agree about what's happening and what's going on the level in terms of voting, or even just looking at our leader, our president that we have now, the sitting president. They are vocal as it relates to if they agree with what he's doing, what he's saying, because we do have relationships outside of the United States. And so everything is riding on this. If we have leadership that's in place that are out of the side of their neck. Countries outside of ours are going to be watching that, and they're going to make decisions as relates to how they're going to interact with us and do business with us. And so that's very important. It's very important. So congratulations to John Alsop and Raphael Warnock in Georgia.
So there you are, a young man, and Afro-black man, but millennial, and there you are, tuning in to your YouTube or you on Facebook at that particular time on Wednesday. When you saw that for the first time, what was your first thought? Your first thought?
Honestly, I would never forget where I was. Of course, I was, we're quarantined, so everybody for the most part is at home. And I was in my living room with my wife and one of my sons, and we were just watching everything that was going on. And everything that went through my mind was, I was glad that I did not see majority of African Americans there fighting to protest or engaging with them. I just sat back in all honesty, I sat back and said to myself, this is not our fight. And when I mean I mean African Americans, this is not our fight. Malcolm X said it best, the chickens are coming home to roost. And so I believe that because the fact is, here you have, what I saw was not just a group of people upset, but what I saw was white supremacy and white privilege having a temper tantrum. For the very first time, we saw white supremacy, we saw white privilege have the ability and the luxury to commit a crime on national TV, talk about it, and tell news reporters how they went about doing it, and then get a rain check as it relates to when they'll be held accountable for their actions. So if it had been Black Lives Matter, African Americans, or as the right wants to say, quote unquote, Antifa, there would have been bloodshed and numerous arrests at that particular day if it was the other side. But of course, this is a prime example or the epitome of what it means to have white privilege. And so I just saw self-destruction. I saw self-destruction amongst, or as I would say, white-on-white crime is what I call it.
So your son was there. One of your sons was there, right? And
my 7-year-old, yes.
And your 7-year-old saw this. What can you tell your 7-year-old? Because he knows about the Capitol, right? He goes to school. What do you tell your son?
Well, I had 3 boys, and of course, one of my sons was with me at the time, and my sons are 6, 7, and 8. And I hold no punches with them about the reality because I'm raising 3 African American boys in America, and so while other white Americans have the luxury to teach their sons about stocks and business, I have to teach my young African American sons about what to do when they get pulled over by the police, about sudden movements, about what it means to know the Constitution, what it means to know your rights, so that when you do find yourself in situations, I don't care who you are, you could be very rich and African American, you can be poor, you can be middle class or what have you. But at the end of the day, when you go out in these streets, when you interact with law enforcement, when you interact with individuals who care nothing about you because they see your skin color, I want to make sure that you make it home at the end of the day. And so I teach my children all the time the value. Well, see, I know we talk about white privilege, but I say it like this. There's also privilege in what it means to be black. And so we define what blackness is. I say every day to my kids, we have to rewrite what a black man is supposed to look like. And so I instill in my kids every day the value and the need to have pride in oneself, self-love, but at the same time educate them on what's going on, make sure they understand, even in their youth, what's going on, so that when they look at the news, it's amazing because when my kids talk to me about what's going on, they have a clear understanding of who Donald Trump is. They have a clear understanding of some of his policies, some of the things that he's done that has been very hurtful and demeaning, not just to African Americans, but also to just minorities in general, whether that be to women or what have you. So I spend a great deal of time talking to them.
Hi, Reverend Carroll. This is Mike speaking. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How you doing?
Very good. I have a question. It's somewhat along that line. The mob that attacked the Capitol was not diverse. I mean, very few participants were black. My question is, what motivated those few to join the attack? on Congress. We talked earlier about the Stockholm Syndrome. Does that have anything to do with, you think, the attendance of some of the African American, particularly men there?
Yeah, so I do believe that there was some Stockholm Syndrome. Even when I looked at the news, there was, I wouldn't even say a handful of African Americans that I saw present, but I did see probably anywhere between 1 to 7 African Americans in total that I saw that were engaging in the mob attack on January 6th. And so, yes, I do believe Stockholm Syndrome can be applied to this situation because it's only here, in America where I see, and I'm amazed with some African Americans who tend to look the other way when individuals from the right tends to do things like this, and they tend to make excuses for them and even try to be politically, in their eyes, politically correct. And what I see is we some of us have fallen in love with our oppressor. Some of us have fallen in love with their ideologies, with their beliefs. Some of us have fallen in love because we have become best friends for some of us with white privilege and with those who are partakers of white supremacy and white privilege, and we think that they love us so much that they can protect us and that they can keep us and that they can make sure that we get the best of the best. But at the end of the day, at the very end of the day, what they do see is your color. And so sometimes, and I don't know if you heard of this thing, it's an old saying, but the paper bag test. And then you had things called, I don't know if I can say this here, but you also had those slaves back during the enslavement time called house Negroes. And sometimes house Negroes, when they were in the house, they felt like they belonged to master. They felt like they were included with master. They felt like that just because they got the breadcrumbs from master that, everything was all right because they were being treated well. Sometimes you may be treated well, but what about your brother or sister that is an everyday citizen who is struggling, who is fighting just to be black, just to exist in their own skin? And so that I think sometimes we miss the mark with that when we feel like we've arrived and we forget about those who come from the same places that we come from.
That's interesting. There's one other thing I'd like to just ask you to share. It appears that throughout our history, every time African Americans have made some progress, there seems to be a white backlash. Can you explain how the election of the current occupants again for Georgia are affecting what's going on? What really went on Wednesday the 6th?
I like to put it this way. Either you can put out or fan the smoke, or you can try to find the root of the fire, right? And so what I mean by that is part of as to why Donald Trump is even in office is because it's backlash from President Obama being in office just because he's a man of color. If you look at President Obama's presidency, his very first term, you had Mitch McConnell, who made it very clear that he was going to shut down everything that Obama wanted to do. He was not going to be cooperative. He was going to ensure that he was a one-term president. And here in America, in the 21st century, you had a man of color, no matter what his mama was, no matter what his daddy was, in white supremacy's eyes, he was black. Regardless of if his mama was white, grandparents were white, he was a black man in their eyes. And so they were upset. And not to mention, he got a second term on top of that, scandal-free, did not have all the stuff going on that we see in the current administration. So now they're upset because not only did he get one term, but he got 2 terms as well. And so, of course, they had made it their business to make sure that we there was some kind of repercussion of backlash for him being in there for 2 terms. And so, what I see is white supremacy having a whole temper tantrum, and they are having the time of their life. Well, they've been having the time of their life up until this moment because now they are very much aware that they have lost everything. A lot of people love to say, Trump said that he wants to make America great again. He ran on that slogan. Well, if I look at it this way, he actually did make America great again. How did he do that? Because it's very simple. He made a complete fool of himself for 4 years to where he had lost his second election. He had not been able to turn the House into a Republican majority, and he's also lost the Senate and made it a Democratic majority. So in my case, he has definitely made America great again by his behavior, because there was also backlash because of his behavior.
I'm going to go back to your sons again before I ask the next question. Is that as a father and seeing all this happen, and you talking to your son, whether you're urban community or rural community, what advice? I'm going back to father. What advice will you give fathers and parents in talking to their children about these situations? Because if they're 7, 8 years old, you're right. They have computers, social media probably better than we do. What can you do to educate them prior to these things happening?
Well, we have to educate them by being willing to just sit them down and have real life conversations with them. Sometimes we like to wait too late when they're older, when they're teenagers. No, a lot of times our kids are exposed to so much because they have social media, because they have tablets, because they have cell phones, because of a lot of them have TikTok and Instagram and things of that nature. We have to be able to beat society to the punch in reaching our children first. And so sometimes it's hard because we think our children do not process things, or they do not understand certain things. When in actuality, when you look at TV, when you look at commercials, all it takes is 30 seconds a lot of times to win you over, to get you to buy into a product, to buy into a toy that you want to buy. So you have to be able to have that same ability and be unafraid and unapologetic when it comes to having conversations, real life conversations with your children. I started talking to my kids when they were 2 and 3 years old. You know, I remember when Trayvon Martin got killed, you know, and Michael Brown. My son, my oldest son, he was about 1, 2 years old at the time, I believe, when it happened. And I remember hearing the verdict, and I remember, even though he couldn't understand it, I was speaking life into him and telling him that you're going to one day be a black man who's going to be able to change the world. You're going to be a young black man who's going to be able to understand what's happening, grasp it, but then add value to what's going on. You might not be able to change the world on your own, but you're going to have something to add. And so it's just things like that, because I understand the value and of making sure that, hey, I'm preparing you to survive, because I'm going to one day no longer be here. And so I want you to be able to make it on your own, be able to think for yourself, be able to critically think and assess life and assess social cues.
So basically, I'm not putting words in your mouth, is that being black in the United States is so terrifying that you would have to educate.
It is. And, we have to educate.
And looking at, in spite of the oppression and the voter suppression, African Americans have made political progress, right? And we play by the rules. Most of the time we play by the rules. But those in power fearful of our progress and change the rules. And in the case of January the 6th at the Capitol, threw the rules out the window. So you don't have to be that old to understand that the rules were thrown out the window. That's part A. And the second part of this is that in the meantime, we know politics, but how many churches are really actually teaching politics during the Bible study, politics when they preach, and you know you're in divinity school, and some people say you don't miss, church with politics. That's been fooled by so many people. That's not true. And so we know all of this. So what are the churches going to do in reference to this? Because it always come up that, that blacks are doing this and blacks voter suppression. When are we going to start teaching our people about political issues and things that just happened, and rules that we already have, and rules that are being broken by certain people, and rules that are not being broken by certain people?
Well, I think part of the problem is some churches have a strong belief that church has no place when it comes to politics, or should have no stance when it comes to politics. But I beg to differ, because part of the civil rights movement, part of what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did as it relates to getting the civil rights bill and the voting rights bill back to back, this is a preacher from the South who was engaged in civil rights, would ultimately change political legislation. And so does the church have a place or a role when it comes to politics? Yes, they do. Jesus was also political. Jesus was political as it related to social issues, right? Right. Well, when have we seen you hungry when you fed the least of these? When have we clothed you? When did we do these things? care of the least of these, you also do to me as well. And so Jesus was also making it very clear that your job is not just to exist and to proclaim the articles of your faith, but your job is also to take care of those who are being taken advantage of. We see it in the Word of God all the time, when nations were being destroyed because they took advantage of the poor. And so, in all honesty, that's kind of what's happening to America. We have, some individuals, some political parties who care nothing about the poor, and because of that, we're kind of reaping the benefits. And so the country is not comprised of a majority of wealthy individuals. It's comprised of a majority of people who are trying to make it on a day-to-day basis. And if you take care of them, they're going to make sure your country runs the way it's supposed to. But if you don't, then you're going to get some kind of backlash some way, shape, or form.
Well, I'm just saying this. I'm fired up about this, and I hope our leaders of our churches understand where we're coming from with this, because yes, we have a church school, we have meetings, we have different classes, but until we start teaching real truth about political issues, we're going to fall back into the same situation over and over and over again. And we get excited when the next time election comes for the president, or we don't even get excited about local politics, but local politics have the judges out there that make a decision whether you're going to go to jail or not. And so it's our time for African Americans to speak up in the black churches and start teaching our people about really what's happening in this country, and not waiting till the last minute like something happened on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm. And stop, and I would add this to what you said. Stop allowing politicians to only come to your church when it's election time. Engage these politicians throughout their terms, their time in office. Check up on them, see what they're doing, hold them accountable. Accountability is not just making sure somebody lives holy every day, but accountability is to check up on leadership and to pray for leadership and to hold leadership accountable. Even David, he had a prophet to tell him about his behavior. He had Nathan was well aware that David could have had him killed, but he said, "Thou art the man that I'm talking about in code." And so Nathan had a responsibility. No matter what the backlash would be, his responsibility was to go to the man in power and tell the man in power the error of his ways. And because of that, David heard what Nathan had to say and changed his behavior and understood and repented on top of that. But a lot of us, we're scared. A lot of us, the only time we love to talk to people in power is if we're going to look good in their sight. And we have to be unapologetic and unafraid to say, no matter what you can say about me, how bad you can smear my name, I speak for God first, and I'm going to speak what thus says the Lord. But the problem is we lie on God a lot, and that's a whole different subject. That's a whole different subject for a whole other episode, probably.
Yes.
Reverend Carroll.
Yes, sir.
Why do you think being a minority, in reference to the white race, is so terrifying to them?
In all honesty, they know history. They know the origination of this country. They know what African Americans have been through from the time that we were brought here, and they know the possibilities of what can be done to them if the shoe was on the other foot. And they are afraid that somewhere down the line, their white privilege will be muted. It will be like a mine. You'll see it, but you can't hear it. It will have no voice any longer. And so the majority of this country's existence has had white supremacy or some kind of white face as the logo of this country. And so and I don't know if you know anything about companies, oftentimes companies will change their logo from time to time. And so what happens if the country of this logo goes from whiteness to diversity when other countries look at us, when other countries deal with us, when other countries want to deal with us on a financial basis, on a political basis? And so, yes, some white folks who function under the reign of white supremacy are losing their unnatural minds right now because they fear, literally, their existence is about to go extinct.
Well, I think you're fired up today, right? Actually, we thank you for joining us today.
No problem.
Just give me like a half a minute to say, if you had to leave us with a thought, what would you tell us?
One thought I would leave is, I tell my children all the time, even though they're so small, the most valuable thing that I can leave you when I'm gone is not an insurance policy, but it's a legacy. You determine what you do with that legacy and how far it will travel and how long it will last.
So, we heard that from Reverend Carroll. We thank you so much for joining us today, and for our listeners,
God bless you.
we thank you, our listeners, thank you so much for just being supportive of our show for the last 5 years, and we just, we thank God for you, and just for 1340 WYCB. And so, you know what we do? We don't stop praying, right? We have to continue to pray. And so we will see us again next Sunday. You've been listening to Sunday Evening with